12 days into the war on Iran, American hopes that the Islamic Republic would simply collapse have been proven false. And with oil prices spiking and regional allies attacked, the war looks to most right-thinking people like an epic self-own. But there are some true believers.
Take you! Take you! Take you! Take you!
No, that wasn't a rally of the far right. That was the Iranian diaspora, or at least some of them, in Vancouver on Saturday, celebrating the war in Iran, which of course has included the killing of maybe even 1,500 plus civilians. Prominent protests in support of the war, yes, support of the war, have also taken place in cities like London and LA. And prominent Iranian American talking heads like Masih Alinejad have been huge backers of this war.
First of all, I have to say to Americans that please, if you're really anti-war, this is the warmonger regime in Iran. They are the root cause of the war. And I keep hearing some of the Americans, some of the politicians, they hesitate to support us. Democrats, this is not about you. This is not about politics. This is about ordinary people getting killed. More than 250 students have been killed in less than 24 hours by the Islamic Republic. More than 32,000 have been killed by the Islamic Republic less than 24 hours. So this is about ending a warmonger regime. I keep hearing Americans say that the Islamic Republic was not a threat to America. Really? No, really, are you serious? This is the regime that sent killers to kill President Trump. So basically, President Trump killed Ali Khamenei before he gets killed by Ali Khamenei.
This is an excursion here, but look, that's just not true. There's no basis in fact as to the Iranians trying to kill President Trump. And it wasn't a case of the Americans killing Khamenei before Khamenei would get to Trump. Khamenei actually was, by the standards of the Islamic Republic of Iran, more moderate. He's been replaced by somebody who's more hardline. You might have noticed Iran's military efforts have substantially escalated since he was killed. Again, as I spoke to Vali Nasser in yesterday's conversation, that became increasingly clear to me. When you remove that layer of RGC commanders, when you remove Khamenei, older people, who of course, as you get older, you become more risk averse, they've been replaced by younger people with a point to prove, the complete opposite of what she's saying. Sadly, though, too much of the Western media platform people like that rather than actual scholars like Vali Nasser, who, he's just a lecturer in politics at Johns Hopkins University. What does he know? However, while it's pro-war Iranians who have received the most attention in the West, including, I must say, the BBC, it's unclear if they're even a majority, let alone an overwhelming one. New polling from the National Iranian American Council suggests that when asked whether they support the war, Iranian Americans are about evenly split. And on social media, anti-war Iranian Americans have been pushing back against the idea that the diaspora speaks with one voice.
Azadi Square was bombed. They're going to free Iran by bombing Freedom Square. As a child of West Tehran, the square looms heavy in my mind. I always associated seeing it with coming home. My grandfather, who would often drive me to and from the airport, called it the old name Shahyad Square. Before the revolution, it was called King's Remembrance, and it was the king himself who built it to commemorate the 2,500-year anniversary of Persian monarchy. It beautifully mixes old and new motifs, and my grandfather, being partial to Mohammad Reza Shah, continued to call it the old name when I was a child. It's so tragic to see yet another one of our cultural sites, our historic monuments, significant things to see in the city come under threat, along with the Tehran Bazaar, which I will post about as well, just holding through to their promise to target our cultural sites. It's so tragic to see this. I wish Reza Pahlavi would stop supporting this war, which is destroying the monuments, the foundations that his father laid down for our country. It's such a tragedy. Does watching this video make you think Iran is being freed? All I see is death and destruction. What an irony. To free us, they bombed Freedom Tower.
the imagery of that really was extraordinary. That was Mamad Ali Shalzadeh, Shalzadeh or at Shalzadeh on Instagram and X. He teaches Persian in New York, as well as being a highly visible voice on social media. For his critics, a little bit too visible. He joins me down the line live now. Mamad, good to see you.
Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Talk to me a little bit about your thinking right now, your views when it comes to the politics of the Iranian diaspora. I want you to talk about that with the graph we just showed, right, from NIAC, which basically shows a kind of even split in terms of Iranians in America and their view on this conflict. Why has the media not portrayed actually the level of polarization within the diaspora? If you just watch TV, you'd think that all Iranian Americans support what Israel and the US are doing right now.
Like all diasporas, the Iranians are split. They have a diversity of opinions, and this is natural. But unfortunately, if you are in a position where your country has a contentious or maybe good relationship with America, certain segments of the diaspora are highlighted. So, for example, small detour, we have many Persian Gulf countries. They have diasporas in America, Bahraini activists, Saudi activists. Somehow we never hear from them in the news. And likewise, the flip side, so the anti-government people in dictatorial states we like are never heard from in the diaspora. The flip side is true for us. The people who support regime change war are put in the forefront. They're always interviewed. They're supposed to be representative of all of us. When polling shows, like you said, it's pretty evenly split. And it's important to note that poll was conducted in the run-up to the war, right? It's being released now, but it was done in a time when war was a theory, when war was an idea. Now that it's being shown what's happening and more anti-war voices are speaking out, thank you for lending me this platform. People are saying, whoa, we didn't support this. I'm getting messages from Iran. I'm seeing them on Twitter. We supported, precision strikes. We supported decapitation strikes. We supported 1 or 2 days, not 10 days, not oil raining in from the sky. So they always platform selectively the people who support the narrative of the empire, of war, of destruction. And the rare anti-war voice is always a cartoonish caricature of a real principled anti-war voice. So Piers Morgan, on your side of the pond, will have Ali Kalabon, the cartoonish pro-war person, and Mohammad Marandi, who is essentially a government spokesperson. I don't want to hate on anyone, but he represents kind of a cartoonish pro-government. He's just an agent of the state. They'll never have someone like me on. This is an open challenge to Pierce. If you're serious about anti-war Iranian voices, bring a credible, humanist, left-leaning anti-war voice, not just some government lackey. But they'll never do that because they want to create this image that the entire Iranian diaspora supports the war. It's to gaslight you. So if you're an American and you say, you know what, I didn't know about Iran a month ago. I used to think it was Iran and Iraq, but now I know, and now I'm against the war. They will tell you, well, look at all these Iranians in America who support the war. And look at all these AI Iranians in Iran who support the war. How dare you white American, tell these brown people what's best for their country. I've seen, kind of like a woke pro-war take, if you can believe that. I saw someone say, how racist are you to override the collective will of a brown country as a white person, left-wing white racist. So they want to portray this image when it's not the case. I have been called by several old family friends, acquaintances, distant relatives in the past few days saying, hey, I love what you're doing. I'm so happy I saw your video. I didn't know you're online. You support me. I had someone call me who say I was part of the anti-government activities in Europe, but I withdrew recently because of the fascistic element that has been added. When Mahsa Amini happened in 2023, it was very left-leaning. It was a leftist movement. Now it's become fascist. The people in the Pahlavi movement are mostly hard right. So ethnic minorities, women, feminists, labor unionists, leftists, they're pulling their support back. But there is this idea that they should flood the zone. They're flooding the zone. They're saying, we're the majority. How dare you? Everyone who speaks up, they're doxing them. I'm documenting this all on the internet. They're doxing them. They're coming for their family. Me, death threats. Your address is posted. Now I'm getting hit with libel and defamation lawsuits, perhaps, demonetized. They're suffocating the anti-war voices. We haven't seen them represented anywhere, not on Piers Morgan, not on the media. They want to create this faux consensus for war when it does not exist. And if NIAC does another poll, I bet you it'll be 70-30 today instead of 50-50 before the war.
Yeah, I suspect that's true. Just anecdotally, some of the people I've spoken to on this side of the pond, British Iranians, there are people who, when there was the last World Cup on and Iran was playing, they were supporting the other team. These guys have now become, passionate nationalists. And I think that point about being 70-30, supporting the government of Iran or the people and nation of Iran, that's how they would see it. I think that's absolutely spot on. You said there that the sort of the Pahlavist movement, the monarchist movement, the people behind Reza Pahlavi are fascists. I want you to go into a little bit more detail with that. What do you mean? Because it's a word that's thrown around. When you say they're fascists, what precisely are you referring to?
Yeah. So it's important to know that maybe in the academy, there's a really particular definition of fascism and the state controls this or that thing or this or that event is happening. What I mean by that is a colloquial sense of far, far right, very far right movement. So on one hand, they talk about racial purity. Many of the people, not Reza Pahlavi himself, but it's important to note there's a bit of a smokescreen. Reza Pahlavi in Persian is different than Reza Pahlavi in English. In English, he's very liberal, very laïcité, fraternité, he's very French affectation. We just want to be like France. And in Persian, he's a bit more, we won't forgive, we won't forget. And then his supporters, his immediate circle of advisors are even more fringe. And then his base of supporters include nut jobs. So people who would say, like Jason Reza Georgiani, Iran was a white Aryan nation and it was invaded and polluted by yellow Asians and brown Semites. And he actually helped found the alt-right with Richard Spencer, and he's kind of a cheerleader for this camp. Or they will say things like, Arab Iranians are not real Iranians. Who are these Arabs? Whatever they don't like, they say it's Arab. So they would say the clerics are Arab and they're Indians, and we are high-minded Aryans. We have pure Aryan genetics. And I even tell them, why do you think they'll treat you like a Westerner? They'll say, well, don't you know we're white? We're Aryan, we're white. And their attitudes towards other political movements. So they claim they're a democratic movement, but what they say is, death to 3 polluters. Marg bar Sefasid, Mullah Chapi Mujahid. Mullahs, leftists, and the Mujahideen Khal, which are another type of like Islamo-Marxist movement. But they have this idea that Marxist leftists, which are representative of a chunk of Iranian society, unlike America where I live, it doesn't have this kind of suffocated political realm. It's very normal to run into Marxist Iranians in bookstores, cafes, the universities. And, especially Kurds are known for being leftists as well. They're trying to suffocate. Also, Iran's ethnic diversity. So the Kurds, the Arabs, they're treated with, we'll accept you, but not really. So if you're a Kurd, but you're too passionate about your Kurdish identity, if you don't want to join with a Persian nationalist movement, then you're a traitor Kurd, you're a sellout. If you're Muslim, if you believe in Islam. So if you look past the English smokescreen, and if you look at what their advisors say in the Pahlavi movement, but especially the foot soldiers, it's just pure far right talking points. I think I've dedicated a lot of time recently to showing this to Western media on Twitter, because a lot of diasporas have played this game very astutely. We've seen this with the Israeli diaspora movement as well, where in English, it's, coexistence, peace, we're liberal. Don't you want to just live with us? You're crazy. We're just trying to be friends. And then in Hebrew, in Persian, in Spanish, whatever diaspora we're talking about, it's death to them. We're going to destroy our enemies. How dare you? There's no space left for you. So when you look in the Persian, and thankfully the auto-translate's becoming a thing now on many social media platforms, you see the type of rhetoric. I mean, just to give you a small anecdote, one guy said, many right-wingers in the West don't support the current war. It's important that we reach them. They say, why should white men die for Israel or for this brown country? You should let them know that one day Islam will take over Europe and they will come to Iran as political refugees. And the way that we use the West as a launching ground to destroy Islamic Iran or the mullahs, we'll use Iran as a launching pad to destroy the Muslims in Europe. True to form, the Pahlavi government actually for some time, they got rid of him eventually, hosted a runaway SS officer who fought in the SS in Nazi Germany, fled to Iran, and had an upstart Nazi party there for some time. So this isn't even foreign to the kind of the state ethos of the Pahlavists. And even Reza Pahlavi himself, sometimes his mask slips. He had an interview with Visegrad, I don't know how to say it, 24? Is that the way you say it? Maybe.
Yeah.
There's this
Visegrad,
Polish, I think, far right page, my understanding is. I don't follow the European kind of machination so closely. But if you watch his interview with them, he's just playing to the crowd. He's saying, the same way that Muslims destroyed Iran, they're going to destroy the West. I talked to my European friends, don't let the Muslims in. Look what happened when we let Muslims take control. So Reza Pahlavi, occasionally his mask slips, And let's not forget, he was told, you're going to have an interview with a man named Adolf from Germany. And he didn't end the interview. It was his advisors that after 10 minutes of him getting interviewed by Adolf from Germany, who's involved in the German army or something like that, finally his advisor stepped in, his English advisor. Your English have a better head on your shoulders than him. Said, okay, we're ending this interview, close the laptop. So when you scratch below the surface, it's like, whoa, what's going on here?
Yeah, that was a really remarkable video. He said, my grandfather was in Iran and he was a military officer. I mean, he's referring to, of course, the Nazi kind of Pahlavis connections during World War II. And it didn't dawn on Reza Pahlavi what was quite going on. Another talking point that you see from lots of people in the diaspora, I must say, particularly in the US and Canada, less so here. I think in the UK it's really interesting. The Iranians in Britain who are more keen to see regime change by whatever means necessary, they tend to be more recent arrivals. That's just my limited experience anecdotally the last 5, 10, 15 years. They've been radicalized. Maybe you can understand why to some extent by the effectiveness of economic sanctions and whatnot. The people who've been here longer actually have a bit more, savviness about things. By contrast, from what I see, Mamad, so you tell me if I'm wrong, I think because most of the sort of the military elites and the economic elites of pre-1979 Iran, those guys went to California, right? So those are the ideological diehards that want to go to bat for Reza Pahlavi. Right. So it's a little bit different to here in Europe. But what I see repeatedly is younger Iranian Americans say, look at Larijani, for instance. They say Larijani is not Iranian because he was born in Najaf, which is a very important Shia city in Iraq, in modern day Iraq. But of course, it's part of the broader Persianate world or the Shia world, whatever your sort of perspective on things is. Right. And many central figures in Persian history have been born outside the borders of what are present-day Iran. In fact, most of them, from Shah Abbas to most of the major poets, etc. And you try and explain this to these people. Lahore was the capital of the Ghaznavid Empire. Uzbekistan was Persianate, etc. They don't really get it. Do these people who are the most strident voices on social media for the return of Reza Pahlavi as the Shah, do they even understand the history of their own country? And if not, why not? This strident dogmatism combined with actually a relative lack of historical knowledge, there's a bit of incongruence there. Try and explain that to me. You're a smart guy.
You're too kind. It's unfortunate that for the last 100 years, Iranians have not been given a fair view of their history. So during the Pahlavi era, we had a lot of this Aryanism, it's called dislocative nationalism, this idea that Iran is actually an Indo-European country because we are Indo-European, but instead of heading to Europe with the other cousins, we stayed in the Middle East. So we're dislocated from our true position. And the Shah actually said something to this effect. There's an interview of him. Reza Zia Ebrahimi has covered this quite recently very well. So this idea was fed to Iranians from Reza Shah up until the 1979 revolution. So for 80 years approximately, they were given this kind of cartoonish vision of Aryanism and anti-Islam and anti-Arab and all these things. And then in the last 50 years, the Islamic Republic has its own narrative of events that also emphasizes certain things and de-emphasizes other things. Iranians have never been given just a broad, neutral view of their history, unfortunately. So if you're a pro-government Iranian, many of them, believe it or not, are not aware that Iran was made Shia rather recently in its history. They don't understand it stretches back just a few centuries. And many anti-government Iranians are not aware of our broad history in places that they now view as racial inferiors. So if you use Pakistani as an insult, under my comments, there are probably tens of thousands by now of comments of Afghan Pakistani, Afghan Pakistani. I was reached out to recently by someone with a very large platform. Famous guy, he's like a pro-war advocate, said, well, you're Afghan anyway, so why do you care? Stay out of our business. So if you tell them that Lahore in Pakistan was the center of the Ghaznavid Empire, where Ferdowsi was under the Ghaznavids when he wrote the Shahnameh, they don't want to hear that. Or that Afghans, were part of our civilization before they went their own way and became their own country. They have this very inward parochial view. So ironically, even though they purport to be Iranian nationalists, they want to sever Iran from its history, its ties, and make it a small, irrelevant, inward-facing country. So if we purge our Islamic connection to our neighbors and our history and just become Zoroastrian converts and just look inward and ignore and even hate and kind of have this contempt for our neighbors, then we won't have any influence in the region. We won't have any friends. We won't have any connections. Look at how connected we are. And this idea that, for example, Khomeini is an Indian because he had one Indian grandparent is like saying Winston Churchill is not. Now I know you might not love him, but I actually don't know much about how he's viewed in England. But he is not actually a Brit. He's a New Yorker like me because his mother was raised in Brooklyn Heights, right? Or his grandmother. I think his mother or his grandmother was raised right here in New York City. So that would be like saying, well, Churchill is not an Englishman. He's not a Brit. He's a Yank. He's an American. See, we have his ancestry goes back to America. This is kind of this like cartoonish view. Now, of course, they would never say the same thing about their own dynasty because the Pahlavis, the family, are Turkic and Mazandarani. They're not Persian. His grandfather's native language was Turkish. He spoke Turkish with Ataturk in his one foreign state visit. So they're not even pure Persians, so to speak, either. And many of these people, their last names, as I pointed out, have Arab origins. One of these guys, his name is like Bedouin. Another person's name is Najafi. Another person's name is... the person who's engaged me or is going to engage me in a lawsuit now, her real last name means born of a high-ranking cleric. And she's like some anti kind of Islam activist. So when you scratch the surface, you find these people don't even know where they come from, who their parents and grandparents are. It's kind of cartoonish, really.
Yeah, I saw a great tweet by a lady. Her surname was Najafi of Najaf, which, as we've said, we've already mentioned, is in Iraq. Yeah. And she said, "I'm Persian, not Muslim." And it's like, your name is Najafi. You mentioned potentially being subject to a defamation suit. I want to talk about that very quickly. Also, you have 185,000 followers on Instagram. You were recently demonetized there, I believe. Talk to me about that as well.
Demonetized on Instagram. I can't go live on Instagram. I'm reach limited on Instagram. My posts were removed.
Wow.
On TikTok, I'm reach limited and my posts were removed, several, criticizing Reza Pahlavi. On YouTube, a video was removed and I was demonetized. Thankfully, YouTube is more fair than TikTok and Instagram. They actually went through the process and I was remonetized now. So over the course of a few days, I followed up and they're fair, to be fair to them. And on other platforms, I faced similar things. I've been banned from Patreon before. This is because what they do is they want to silence you, like I said. So they have these reporting mobs, basically. They have group chats. I've been sent screenshots by spies of these group chats where they send videos of people, or they even do it openly. They just post you on pages with hundreds of thousands of followers saying, with specific instructions, go report him, select for disinformation on this post and for terrorism support on this post. So a post where, like the Azadi Square video you showed, where I show Iranians getting bombed, they will report it as supporting terrorism and the video will get taken down if you're just reporting on something, right? So they use all these tactics. And then even more vile, well-known member of the Iranian American community in New York gave me a death threat, which I consider credible because they have photos of them with guns all over their page. My parents' address and phone number were doxed. My parents don't even really agree with half of the things I say, and they often encourage me to not even bother engaging with these people. My information has been doxed. It's just, and then now I'm being hit with this kind of lawfare where they're sending you cease and desist letters and they're saying, we're going to sue you. And I talked about it and several anti-war voices reached out to me, 3 people saying I was given a similar cease and desist and I just desisted because I didn't want to have to go through this, onerous, arduous process of $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. And now what I've just found out is that in the UK, the standard of libel and slander is lower than in America. In America, you have to prove intent and malicious intent and financial damage. And if they're famous, it's hard to do. But in the UK, apparently the bar is much lower. I'm sure maybe you've dealt with this as a media company. But so I'm worried now I'm going to end up in the British court system because I said someone's father is a regime agent, which is just a fact, by the way, on the record.
But the good thing with libel law is if you don't have any resources, if you're not very wealthy, most of the ambulance chasing lawyers who do no win, no fee say, let's stay clear. If you're independently wealthy, Mamad, you might be in trouble. Before we let you go, let you go, where can people follow your work? How can they help you? How can they keep up with you? Because for me, and again, this is not Taruf, this is not me being obsequious, Mamad. I think you're one of the most critical voices right now in the Iranian diaspora. How can people keep up with you and know what you're thinking on a daily basis?
Thank you. So the anti-war humanist fighting the fight against the warmongers and the people who want to see death and destruction in the world, that's on my personal Twitter and Instagram. So the video you got was from my Instagram, Shahrzadeh. And I know it's hard to spell. Maybe you could put it in the bio or something. And I have a TikTok too. They're mirrors. And I would recommend people follow both because sometimes posts get deleted from one but not the other. And one's deprioritized and not the other. And I have a YouTube account where I'm now posting long form videos because people are saying there's things I don't understand. Like this requires 30 minutes to explain. So now I have a YouTube as well that's active with the same name. The real work, the work that I hope to resume once all this madness is done and the warmongers go to the dustbin of history and true, freedom, justice seeking people prevail, is this work. This is my book, The Flame of Love. It's a book of Rumi poems. I never pictured myself doing this. I always saw myself as a cultural ambassador. I'm in my cultural center where we have Rumi nights every Wednesday at 6:30 here in Manhattan. I would hope if you ever end up in New York, you would be our guest here. We gather, we have fun, we talk. Now it's more commiseration. But my real work is Persian poetics. That's my original platform. My personal platform, you mentioned, has 185,000 followers. I just started using it for this purpose. Before, all my posts were on Persian poetics, and it was just poetry. Rumi, it was just nice stuff. I was never engaged in wars. I was never engaged in libel lawsuit and doxing. It's unbelievable what these people have forced me to do by just advocating for this vicious, inexcusable war on civilians on a defenseless kind of state with no air force, with no navy. It's just, I hate that I'm even having to do this. I wish that our first interaction online would be just talking about Rumi and Hafez and things like that. It's so frustrating.